I am eager to get started and talk about something that I'm passionate about, which is it's actually fascinating what Lorraine was just talking to everyone about with the concept of AI and how AI is helping us to personalize or differentiate the things that we do in the classroom. What I want to talk about is sort of a different approach to that from a very human-centric and in the personalization and the differentiation that we do every day when we are working with teachers, our staff, et cetera. So I'm just going to share my screen right here. And all right, we'll jump in. So I do want to also remind everybody, we do have people in kind of backstage, if you will, helping to answer any of the questions that you may have. So please feel free to utilize that. Obviously, we only have a short 15 minutes together. So if we don't get to everyone's responses, we're happy to do so post our time together, but just an opportunity for you to get the questions asked. And what we are going to talk about in these 15 minutes is just how that personalization can impact the educator experience, which you all know. But hopefully I'll give you some new different actionable strategies to help kind of think about differentiating your approach to coaching, as well as ways to use some of these tactics in your school. Now, before we get started, I have to tell you a story of a first-time principal, a new principal, and actually that is me, the story that I'm going to tell you. So in my experience, I had the gift of having great success in my schools as a director of education, worked with some amazing educators, principals, teachers. But early on in my tenure, I learned a very valuable lesson. So let me kind of paint the scene for you. I had this gift of working with a very experienced, high-performing team. They had significant influence in the school. I was really excited to work with them, but I was equally as excited to share like my own, I'm a new principal, so my own new innovative ideas for how we can improve instruction. Let's move the needle. I was eager to bring my enthusiasm via this expressiveness that you're seeing, sort of my inner cheerleader that we can do this. And honestly, I was eager to bring my belief that, we can bond, we can build trust, we can connect, and that's going to be the best way to move us forward, because after all, that's what served me well when I was working with other teams. Now, what that meant for me as a new principal is I would, of course, start team meetings with, and I don't know if any of you have experienced this, but the good old icebreakers and the team builders. I was like, all right, guys, we're together. Let's start with this icebreaker. Let's start with this team builder. And I literally would look at this team and they would look back at me and share. I could just see the thought bubbles. What planet is this principal coming from? She has no sense of reality. And I know I was losing the group's confidence. So I needed to figure out a way to get back on track. Now, this experience is not uncommon for school leaders, and the problems that we see in education are the challenges. In fact, we know that only 52% of teachers report that they're satisfied with their relationships with school administrators. 52, half. That means, obviously, about half aren't. Now, we know that that's not necessarily a big surprise because of the pressure that all educators are under. In fact, we know that 77% of teachers frequently find their job stressful. I'm surprised that's not 100%. We know that 85% of principals experience job-related stress. By the way, that's compared to just a third of other working adults. So in the field of education, we're under a tremendous amount of stress. And then we know from Ed Week alone, they shared this in March, that we need to build connections in order for our educators to have a trust and safe space to facilitate those two-way conversations and to drive and motivate our staff. We know that we need to provide the tools and we need to provide the mentorship to help navigate those workplace challenges. And yet we know that there are significant resource constraints as we are working with our teachers. In fact, I know those challenges well. When I was a principal, I was committed to servant leadership. I was like, I'm going to be there for our people. And I thought I could easily do that when I was a first-year principal, but juggling those many administrative responsibilities of running a school, including the importance of coaching educators, was something that I found challenging, especially with limited time. we would have, in my situation, I would have 2 formal observations a year, sometimes 1 based on the tenure of the teacher. And that was it. So how, in this idea of servant leadership and my enthusiasm for what we could do at the school, how could I make an impact with so little face time? Becoming a district leader further magnified that pressure, to be honest. Now I have to balance this long-term planning and making sure that I can support and implement the district's vision, but also helping the principals then manage their day-to-day needs. Providing the guidance that people need while overseeing the operational responsibilities that come with administration, definitely not easy, but it is possible. And we would suggest that the solution is differentiation. Now, I'm going to talk about it a little differently than what we may know. Going back to the story I shared about my experience as a first-year principal, what struck me was that I was speaking to this team in a way that I wanted to be motivated, not in a way that worked for them. I knew I could still help the team be even better. I mean, I knew I had good rationale for the new ideas to bring to the table, et cetera. However, I needed to differentiate the way I coached and led the team to see those results. In fact, it made me think of something that I like to call the platinum rule. Many of us grew up with the golden rule, right? Treat others the way you would want to be treated. But the platinum rule takes it a step further because it recognizes that not 2 people are exactly the same. And therefore, most people will approach their work, their motivation, their engagement differently. In fact, we know from our research at Emergenetics, 85% of people think differently than you do. And leaning into only your own preferences to motivate others is unlikely to be a successful response. So I had this aha moment with the instructional theory I know many of you are familiar with. It was originally introduced in 1995. Yes, that may speak to my years of experience, but it was recently updated in 2017, and that is Carol Ann Tomlinson's differentiation instruction theory. And it's that one size fits none. Now, my aha moment was that I had the tools to connect with adults the way I used to use the tools to connect with kids. As teachers, we take content. I'm going to use the word translate, which, by the way, I thought it was awesome that Lorraine was talking about and Ryan were talking about ELL and how AI is helping translate. We've been doing translation for kids to speak to a way that different kids learn best for years in our differentiated approach. But what I had an aha was this approach can be the same when coaching our educators, our adults, if you will. As leaders, we need to act as a translator. We need to speak to educators in the way that they best learn, in the way that they are best motivated in order to help them retain, process, navigate the many challenges that are on our shoulders. Now, of course, Tomlinson's work was originally geared towards students, but those 4 pillars that she speaks to can be applied to adults too. The same principles that we use to tailor the way we communicate with and instruct kids can be applied to how we empower and coach our staff. So when I started utilizing differentiation strategies as a principal, my school performance improved. And as a district leader, honestly, it became the secret ingredient that I found to support our school leaders. How can you do this? Well, as you think about mentoring educators, think about differentiation mind and consider following an approach that I call the me or self-awareness, the we or building trust and rapport, and the us kind of framework. It's creating that school-wide culture. In other words, how do me, need to think differently and then translate that information to help teams, or we, perform to the best of their abilities so that the whole school community, which is us, thrives. Now, I'm going to give you some strategies for coaching, or what I like to say, becoming a translator, to bring this approach to life. And thinking about this, I want you to consider we all have different preferred ways of interacting. We have different ways of thinking, behaving, but understanding those ways can help build strong relationships and can navigate the important mentorship moments simply by understanding their needs. So there's a variety of ways to approach it, and I'm going to kind of link that into Tomlinson's theory as well. So when you're advising staff, the first thing to think of, I like to, consider is that environment. Number one, make sure to listen actively. And these are things that but just kind of a reminder. Show you're committed to understanding before being understood, but also that you're committed to communicating regularly and in a way that matches rapport. Number two, determine your coaching approach. And what I mean by that is decide when you need to tell, drive, pull others to action, or when you need to kind of step back, counsel, maybe gather everyone together, kind of herd others to action. Number three, change is inevitable. It occurs faster than many of us are ready for. So provide recovery time. Now, some people that you work with only need, I like to say, 2 deep breaths. Like change is happening. They're like, this change. Okay, yeah. Okay, fine. It's probably better. The response to that change, the recovery time is less. But some may need as much as 2 full months to recover, but recognizing that recovery time that it takes to change helps people to transition into the change in a space that gives them kind of the grace or the environment to make that transition. Now, there's 4 other considerations that I want to bring to mind. And this is in kind of the way that we actually access the content. The first is the why. When you're working with others, there are people who, no matter their approach, they may be coming at that with you need to know the reasoning, the rationale, need to know the research, especially when suggesting change or advising others. They appreciate the emphasis on like making things more efficient. And honestly, they may appreciate and need your expertise and credibility along the way. Other people approach work from the how. I need the steps. I want the actionable models for implementation. Give me the timelines. Give me those rubrics and samples, things that they can borrow and apply, the efficiency, apply right away. That is both kind of aligned to the process and the product from Tomlinson's work. So thinking about that process and product, there are people who need to know that how as well. The who, you have people who, might I say that was more my lead approach to things. And that is who's going to be there with us, who's going to be there supporting the work, who's going to be impacted, who will be involved, showing compassion for the strain and challenges of the job, making sure that we're a team, that we're a collaborative group together. And that may be how some prefer to lead into their work. But then the last one is kind of the what if. And that is the people that approach their work with just sort of an interest in exploring the possibilities. Like, why not? Let's just try new and unique approaches. Let's be okay with experimentation. Let's expect the unexpected. And honestly, let's have some whimsy with this. Like, let's bring some fun into education, because it's not just the kids who want to laugh and enjoy themselves after all. So these varieties of approaches are different ways that the individuals that we work with may lean into the most. So I kind of we had polls just a second ago, so I'm going to have us think about a poll from, I'd like to hear from many of you. Just a quick answer of the questions I just shared: the why, the how, the who, and the what if. I kind of want to know from your approach. We can go ahead and launch that poll. Which one do you lean into the most? Like, which one you're like, boy, when I have that motivates me, or I am able to focus on that the most. Now, part of the fun in doing this is thinking about, acknowledging where you go to most frequently and what motivates you the most. That is a great opportunity for self-awareness. Or as I like to say, the me in our framework. It can help you identify maybe potential blind spots so that you can connect to the we, to the team, to understanding that your approach is not necessarily working for the approach of others. So we'll give it just maybe a few more seconds as people are having the opportunity to think about, of those questions, the why, the how, the who, the what if, what are the ones that maybe motivate you the most? All right, let's just kind of see what we've got. I know that was pretty fast and furious, but honoring the time that we have together, our results. Wow, so 62% of you that are with us today, you prefer that why. Bring me the rationale. You better bring me the data. Let's make sure that this is efficient. Let's make most use of your time. What I like is the recognition, though, and I love the responses to this, that we do have responses that people who are participating in this webinar are approaching it from all four. There are people who are listening, they're saying, well, wait a second, I actually just give me the how, like just tell me what to do and I'll do it. Give me a sample, give me a model, give me a rubric. The who is my number one factor. Who are we working with? Who are the people that we spend, the time together that are going to help us get through this? And then there are the people on this, in this webinar that are asking the what if? Like, let's explore, let's get motivated by those opportunities to assess, to experiment with lots of things. I think it's important as we navigate our coaching and our differentiation to not just think of what we lean into first, but think of those other three questions and the frequency for which you may unintentionally, because of your own natural thinking and behavioral preferences, you may forget to address some of those things because it's natural for us to land where we prefer to get energized. But when we acknowledge that there are other ways people get energized, we can learn to become a better translator for ourselves. So what I mean by that is I want you to think of not just those questions, but also how these natural tendencies in our thought and behaviors have an impact on Tomlinson's four pillars. So I'm going to go back to that first year principal story really quick, and the team that I was trying to coach and to motivate. I was coming at them with regard to the question of who. Let's all do this together. Let's team build. We're going to bond. Hooray. Let's start every meeting with an icebreaker because we need to connect. Because after all, if we don't connect, we won't be as effective. But I had little regard to the importance of the why and or their expertise. Now, their analytical brains were wanting an approach that was nearly the opposite of the approach that I was providing through my relational brain. I needed to translate what I was hoping for in content, process, product, learning environment through the lens of why. I need to listen to their expertise. I need to make sure that I had a chance to share not only their expertise, but gain some buy-in from mine in the subject matter. Deliver a message that was respectful of those experiences and highlighted more of the outcomes than the steps, and trusted that they could achieve those outcomes, inviting suggestions for the change and being open to any other researched back options or other viable alternatives they may have provided once I established the outcomes, and ensuring that atmosphere to empower teachers to share their expertise with one another. Another thing that I was not necessarily considering that I should have thought of, and this is, by the way, just as examples, but I wasn't thinking of the recovery time. Again, how change can impact all of us. What happens to us as we are navigating, the content, navigating the process, navigating the product, navigating the learning environment that we wanted, and when we're dealing with change, how that is impacted, and what I could have done to be more respectful for that, especially when I recognize the need to support my desired change in a manner with which the team could fully embrace. So let's go back. You might be curious about the results that came from my attempt to differentiate my coaching through translating the information in a way that worked best for the team's preferred approach to thinking and behaving. Well, to start, in future meetings, I reiterated things like I valued their time. We'll jump right into the content that needs to be discussed. I communicated that it was my hope we could be as efficient as possible in the short, in my situation, 40 minutes of plan time that we might have together. I reinforced their expertise, yet I also worked to establish my own credibility and my own knowledge by sharing latest research that I had been exposed to. Now, I have to say, I didn't completely abandon my inner cheerleader. That's just who I am. I just made sure that those tendencies were balanced with the other strategies that I've outlined. I needed to make sure I responded to and recognized where they were coming from. And so tempered some of my natural first places that I go to, sometimes without even knowing or acknowledging that I'm approaching the work in that manner, but doing it in a way that was respectful and met the needs of that team. Now, after a bit of time, I did indeed. I gained the team's trust. I was able to collaborate with all members of the group effectively. They ultimately showed tremendous enthusiasm and interest in the new approaches I was hoping for. They did it because they had the buy-in, and I got the buy-in from personalizing my approach or translating what I needed to have done in a way that they preferred to hear. And by the way, I knew I made it when I was invited to their team happy hour. So what I did is I just asked myself, how do me, need to think differently and translate information to help teams, we, perform to the best of their ability so that that whole school community, us, thrives. A few final reminders. As I shared, I needed to examine how I prefer to think and behave, what motivated me. Then, if working with others who were different, I wanted to make sure I didn't abandon who I was. I maybe just tempered that approach. So be your authentic self, but know you need to know it first in order to temper it. The next thing is I had to be willing to ask for feedback. In those early years, I actually did it throughout my career, still do it today. I regularly ask for whether or not, is this approach working for you? The meeting, the conversation, is it effective? And I had to accept my own imperfection and be willing to understand that while I might have been trying to meet their needs in a personalized or translating type approach, I needed to, continue to improve. And finally, I asked what they needed. Treat others as they would want to be treated. What did they need from me? What was something that I could do to be better for them as well? I think about the future of leadership and education, and I think about the fact that there's a lot of things that our educators have in front of them. And I know that effective teacher professional development boosts student achievement by 21 percentage points. So if we can just be there and be what people need us to be, differentiate for them, then we certainly can provide that effective professional development and therefore increase student achievement. Of course, here's a resource for you. There's other resources that I know were loaded. Please feel free to scan that if you're interested in learning more about ways to differentiate, if you're learning more about your own team's personal preferences or your own individual personal preferences. And every time, always think about some action that you can take away to adapt your coaching and learning style. Just want to thank you. Obviously, every journey begins with a small step to the school community of your dreams. And thank you so much for the time.